If you can't say no without feeling guilty, you're not alone. We've all been through those experiences where we're trying to put the boundaries and the balance into place. We're choosing that for our well-being, but then the anxiety and the stress rushes up. Well, today we're going to go deeper than setting and holding boundaries. We're going to explore, why does that guilt hit us so hard in the first place? How can we work with that sensation, the vibrational feedback that kind of brings up the guilty feelings and makes us want to rush in and fix them? And I'm going to share a simple spiritual pivot that kind of helped me to partner with spirit to release the guilt, and it can help you too. When you say no or you set a boundary and you still feel guilty for it sometime later on, maybe you were steady in the moment, but then something starts to flare up in you. Why does that guilt hit so hard? It's because there's a vibrational aspect to it that no one talks about. We're always tuning into the vibes that people give off. So maybe they're reacting in that moment, they're at their house and you're at your house and they're ruminating over the fact that you said no, you won't do that for them, when usually you would always tell them yes. Maybe you're experiencing a vibrational pushback, and that's okay. The biggest problem is not that you're experiencing that sensation. The real issue is that you are telling yourself some stories about it, right? And here's what that can look and feel like. So maybe you've said no, you set your limits, you're moving forward. And then later that evening, something stirs in you. You get kind of an anxious feeling in your gut, or a tightness in your chest, or, something makes you replay that whole scenario. And all of a sudden, maybe you doubt yourself. But then you start telling yourself stories. You might say, oh no, I was too harsh. Or that might have been kind of selfish because I really could have done it. I could have said yes. Maybe I should go back and say yes after all. But all that is maybe just you sensing something in that moment. And I can't tell you this is what you're sensing. All I can tell you is that when I have felt into that and I've asked myself, maybe I'm not really needing to feel guilty over this. Maybe it's just a sensation and I can let it pass. I can acknowledge it, but it doesn't have to mean certain things. It has helped me to recognize that, yeah, maybe I'm tuning into a vibration that they're struggling to get to peace, but I don't have to rush and make them feel better. So if you're willing to explore this, maybe you're just sensing that they're disappointed or annoyed, or they're struggling to accept your no. So maybe you can accept that, okay, that vibe is real, I'm feeling it, but the good news is that it can't hurt you. It's just a sensation that you're aware of, okay? And as a faithful person, obviously at that point you want to say, okay, God, you have made me in this way that I am sensitive and I am aware, but I want to know, what do I do with these vibes? Well, we need to separate the sensation from the emotional lies. But we also have to understand, okay, well, where are these lies coming from? Because we all tell ourselves these stories. And we've been practicing these stories for a long, long time. Think about it. When we were kids, from the time we were young, we were sensing. We didn't have language, though. We didn't have language for the vibes that we were sensing. So what did we do? Well, we learned to read the room. We learned to adjust ourselves. And it wasn't because we were powerless. It was because the fact is we are all spiritually sensitive individuals. We were just trying to make sense of the things that we were picking up, the sensations. Yeah, we also picked up the physical cues, body language or somebody's disappointment, right? But we did feel even those cues on a visceral vibrational level. And because we weren't able to fully understand it, we built stories around it. Things like, I can just shapeshift and that'll keep the peace. Or I won't be rejected. I won't lose connection if I just say yes or please them. And that usually worked, right? We didn't feel the heaviness. We felt calm again. So noticing the sensations, the vibration, that's always been normal. That's just been part of God's design. But the stories are what is old baggage. And now we're ready. We're aware of this guilty feeling and we're ready to interrupt that with God's help. So as soon as you recognize this pattern, this sensation, the stuff that makes it feel like guilt, you're open to interrupting that, then you can start pivoting to choose differently. So let's talk about what that spiritual pivot can look like when you've said no, but the guilty feelings are coming up. Number one is you just accept that the sensation is rising. It's information. It's just an awareness. Maybe you are feeling the vibes and you are sensing somebody pushing back vibrationally. And even though you'll never be able to validate it, I've never been able to validate it, you're acknowledging that the sensation is just what it is, a sensation. And number two, you choose differently. Instead of fixing things and explaining yourself or texting to smooth things out, I did that plenty of times. You're pivoting and saying, okay, hold on. It's just a sensation. Whether or not it's really because they're disappointed in me, I am asking you, God, are you okay with me? And this is when you're testing out by faith the very things that you've always been told, where people say you can't earn your worth, you can't prove your worthiness. God loves you just as you are. And I can tell you this because that's the very question that popped up for me. When I used to squirm in this discomfort of someone else's displeasure or my perception that somehow maybe they weren't happy with me, and I was sensing those things, I asked myself one day, well, what if I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to do in saying no? What if I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do in honoring balance and putting the boundaries in place or communicating what's necessary? What if my limits as a wife whose husband was deployed, as a homeschool mom who only has so much energy, what if I'm doing enough already? And yes, was it uncomfortable? Yeah, it was, but it wasn't impossible. And that's what I really hope you can receive, because only you can get this sense of peace about it when you give it a try and you do those steps. You're first just acknowledging, oh, here's that guilty feeling again, or that sensation rising up, and don't get stuck in figuring out why am I feeling this way, or who's mad at me, or anything like that. Come back to first asking yourself about your why. Why did I make my boundary? Why did I say no? And realize that you have important reasons there, because that was my saving grace. I knew why I was saying no, and it was usually so that I could return myself to a better balance, to not stretch myself so thin, because man, I used to blow up when I was pushed to my limit. The most important people in my life didn't deserve that. So for me, I learned not to feel so guilty in saying no when I thought about what I was saying yes to. And the crazy thing is, that was such a simple shift. I just said, well, what if? What if it's true that I don't need to be everything to everyone? And it actually translated into less and less of that sensation that would rise up, that we all know feels like guilt. So I encourage you to trust that that is where you can find relief too. You ask with a humbled heart. You're saying, please help me to know. Because if there is anything that I need to step in and fix, or I need to resolve, you should move forward with that. But at the same time, you're also saying, please help me to not buy into all of the stories I always tell myself. Help me to remind myself of why I have said no, and to be at peace with knowing that you are okay with that. You're asking for God to help you remember the balance that you're trying to achieve. So it's kind of a pause and release kind of practice. You've said your no, you've set a boundary, and you're getting feedback. There's a lot of moving parts, and you maybe are trying to move forward, and you have to pause, because either you get the pushback in real time, or you get the sensation, and either way, you feel guilty. And you notice what's coming up for you. You notice that it makes you afraid that they're going to reject you, or it makes you afraid that they think you're a failure, or that you're selfish. You notice that emotional lie. You notice it enough so then you can release it to spirit. That's where you make that pivot, and you're just going to say, I feel the pressure to fix this, and I feel like I'm bad because they're upset, but I release this lie to you right now, Spirit. Help me to choose balance and not react out of fear. And maybe you could even just imagine that, that heaviness, that guilt that you're feeling, it's like a coat that you can say, let me undress. Let me remove that layer. Here you go, God. And then this is the part that nobody tells you. You're just going to muddle through. You're going to muddle through the discomfort. You might have to let things be unclear for a little while. And if you decided to, the next day or whatever, maybe you will clear the air. Maybe you'll discuss and say, hey, I really want you to know this is where my heart was. This is where I'm coming from. But you don't have to. You lean on the assurance that Spirit is holding you even while your nervous system is recalibrating. You're leaning on this trust that you have. You're saying, I need to learn what it feels like to actually put my trust in that in the moments, rather than say, yeah, that's for later when I want to be spiritual. You're learning to make it a part of your active life. in real time. So just remember, if somebody asks you to help and you have to say no, it could be for a project or a meal train or a church thing. You can feel the sensations. You can feel anxious about the fact that, oh, I feel unsettled and I feel selfish. And you might even tell yourself things like, well, a good woman would show up. I don't want them to think I'm selfish. But even though you feel all of that, just know that you can also just pause and say, what if I don't have to prove that I'm a good person? What if God doesn't need me to be everything for everyone? And you trust that God never assigned you or me to convince others that we are loving. You are just doing your best to find your equilibrium here in the mind, heart, and spirit balance of what you feel led to do. So pause and release. That's the difference between your anxious reactions that take you kind of back into people pleasing and so forth, and just a quiet, rooted self-acceptance. You're no longer abandoning yourself. You're saying, I accept all of me. And even if they don't like it, and even if those sensations rise within me, I can let them fade off and I can keep anchored here. So if you're willing to try this, give yourself credit for choosing proactive growth that includes spirit right in the middle of the discomfort and the anxiety. I know you're already praying, you're already seeking. Maybe just consider that you hadn't thought about the fact that the sensations don't have to mean anything, that maybe God's design is that we can sense things, but that we can also release those quickly and bring them to God, that they don't have to mean all the stories we've always told ourselves about them. And if you'd like a deeper dive into turning the mental noise into more calm, especially looking at the vibrational sensations into more peace, then check out this video next. I'll see you over there.